Hello everybody, welcome to my channel Rewind That, where I discuss and review popular television series. Okay, today I'm going to be discussing Ballers. Now I know that I'm late, however, I'm going to be recapping briefly episode 1 and 2 because they already had 3 episodes. So I'm just going to go over very quickly episode 1 and 2, and then I'm going to go into full detail episode 3. Here we go. So the season basically opens up with Spencer Strasmore. He's offered, well, I don't want to say it was opened up like that, but like I said, we're just doing a brief recap. So basically, we know that in episode 1, Spence gets an offer to become an owner of a team, okay? I forgot which team it was, but I think it's in Kansas City or something like that. But anyway, it's a really big deal, something very big for him. And I believe that Joe Crutel was trying to, talk with him and connect with him or whatever because they had parted ways last season. But then toward the end of the episode when he found out, I am jumping, like I said, I'm doing a very quick recap of episode 1. When Joe Crutel found out that he was about to, that Spence was about to actually buy or become an owner of, because I'm not sure if he's buying anything. Well, no, I think he is because he has to be funded. So anyway, buying a team, that's when Joe kind of is like, okay, well, it seemed like Joe was saying that he's about to be a competitor. He's about to be in competition with Spence. It didn't seem like he was too happy to hear that. So anyway, because of that, Joe decides he wants to look into building a sports campus. All right, and then I am looking at my notes. So let me just go through the notes real quick so we can wrap this up really quick. So in the first episode, Ricky Jarrett, one of my favorite characters, he gets a sweet deal. After, last season, there was drugs found in his system, and we thought that it was going to be pretty much bad for him. But anyway, in the first episode, we see that he gets a sweet deal. Jason calls him with the great news. And then literally right after that, he gets hit by a car. And so unfortunately, that was a little scary because I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? Because it kind of just like, the show didn't end with that, but it didn't follow up with what happened with Ricky. So in the next episode, we see that Ricky is in the hospital. He's recovering from the surgery. Unfortunately, I think he tore his ACL or something like that in 3 different places, which is pretty bad. So they're like, it might take a year before he can ever play again. And then he comes to a realization, like, you know what, no, I'm not even gonna play again. Like, this is just forget it. Let's wrap it up. God must have other plans for me. So we still weren't able to see, what plans he, that God has for him, or that he thought God has for him. So we're still waiting on that. Actually, we're going to get back to that later for episode number 3. Then let's see, Chuck Green, right? He is dealing with the situation that happens with Keeson Teagan, I think. Yeah, Keeson Teagan. So Keeson comes out of a Jack in the Box with his boys, and he starts trouble with another group of guys. The group of guys take out they get aggressive and they pull out guns, and then Keeson's guys pull out guns as well, and they start shooting. This whole thing, somebody gets shot, but he doesn't get killed. The rival gang, I don't want to call him a gang, but whatever, the rival gang gets shot. One of them gets shot, and the whole thing is caught on video camera. So security intel that works with Chuck actually was able to get the footage and give it to Chuck. So they were trying to get ahead of it and do damage control and everything like that, in order to save. Chuck not only wants to save his behind, obviously, because he's, team manager or whatever he is for the team. I think he's a general manager. I forgot at this point, guys. I'm sorry. But he is a big deal, right? And he can fire players. That's how big he is. So anyway, he's trying to also make sure that he covers his behind, but he also wants to cover Keeson because he just backed him last season. He backed Keeson over Ricky Jarrett because Ricky because Ricky became his urine was dirty or whatever. Okay, so anyway, sorry if I'm kind of like stuttering or whatever, but I'm trying to move forward a little fast. Okay, so Chuck is trying to make sure that the press doesn't, this information, the shooting doesn't get leaked to the press. All right. And so, but my thoughts on Keeson, you know, I just feel like you can't, he's the prime example of you can't take the hood out of the boy or the man or whatever. Like, you could take the man out the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the man or female, whoever, right? He's just a prime example of that. Like, he just can't let go of that. And the fact that he's riding around with his friends and they have guns, that just goes to show that he's just asking for trouble. Like, he feels like he doesn't need security, which is on a more professional level, because he has his boys, you know what I mean, who are regular people, and it's no offense to them, but as a professional football player, you have to leave your old lifestyle behind, and even your old friends. You can't hang out with your old friends anymore like that. So anyway, we're going to go a little bit more into that as well as we go into detail with episode 3. All right, so now we're going to start off with episode 3. And so Spencer is trying to land a GM for his team. And then because he's taking a while, Brett offered to be his partner. You know, he offered to be CFO of this whole endeavor. And basically Spence was he was totally quiet about it. So not really sure how he feels about that whole thing. But I think his back is against the wall because Brett and his brothers are the ones that are going to back him financially. So what can he really say at this point? Moving on. So Joe is competing with Spencer, like I was saying before, but Spencer doesn't even know it. That's how stupid this is. I don't understand why Joe is doing this. I have no idea. Okay. The thing about this is that Spence cut his ties with Joe. I wouldn't say he's not friends with him anymore, but he cut his ties of being a partner with Joe because Spence started towards at the end of last season, Spencer started to do things according to his personal vendetta, okay, against the NCAA. I believe it's the NCAA. Like, guys, if I'm wrong, I will put the correction in the description box. All right, I'm not a football person or whatever. I just love this show. So anyway, so Spence had a personal vendetta against the NCAA because of what happened to his brother. Like, they turned their backs on his brother, and it eventually led his brother to commit suicide. So yes, Spence had a personal vendetta against them, as I said already. And he was going rogue, and he was going after them in a big way, which could have brought some heat onto not just Spence, but since Joe was his partner, would bring heat onto Joe as well. And he didn't want to drag Joe down. He didn't want to sabotage Joe. And that's why he decided to sever his ties with Joe. And I guess maybe Joe doesn't understand this, because if he did understand it, he wouldn't be trying to compete with Spence right now, which is, it's just so stupid. So anyway, so Haas is one of the security personnel that works with Chuck, okay? And so he brings some new information about Keeson to Chuck and tells him that the LAPD found a 9mm gun that was registered in Keeson's name. And so Chuck is like, oh my gosh, you're like, can it get any worse, you know? And so he says to Chuck, can you just do me a favor and don't tell me any more information, because I have to have some type of plausible deniability here. You know what I mean? Like, so that was that. And let me just make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So in the next, in another scene, Spence has a meeting with Jason, and he offers Jason a job as GM for his team. All right. And then we have another scene. We're going to get back to that. I'm just going scene by scene. We're going to get back to Jason and his response. So Jason, he tells him he's going to think about it. And then we move on to another scene where Reggie is trying to show Vernon that he supports him in his gaming career. You know, he's trying to help him juggle being a professional football player, and also now he wants to be a gamer. Okay, so he's trying to let him know that he supports him, but he has to try to convince Joe as well. All right. So I think the whole thing is stupid with the whole gaming thing and how this guy is a professional football player, but he wants to get into gaming. But you know what? In reality, the gaming world is serious, guys, and there's some serious money to be made, so I've heard. And plus, I guess if it's fun, why not make money at something fun, right? But anyway, like I said, this guy already has a career. Moving on. So Jason goes and he calls his girlfriend on FaceTime and he tells her, you know, look, I'm having a stressful day. I'm dealing with the Keeson situation, and now Ricky Jarrett, he can't play anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And his girl is like, you know, you're just always stressed, blah, blah, blah. And she said, you need a career change because you're always stressed. And he said, what would make you say that or whatever? And then he goes, it's funny that you say that because I just left the meeting with Spence and he offered me GM to be the general manager for his team. And she's like, isn't that just as equally as stressful? And he's like, yeah, but I wouldn't have to deal with clients. But at the same time, I would have to have a boss, and I'm not used to that. He didn't like the idea of having a boss because he owns his own agency. So he's basically saying, you know, that part he's not too fond of. However, he said it is Spence that he'll be working for. And she said, you know what, you need to separate the friendship from the business, and you need to go do your due diligence and find out how it is to work with Spencer. And she told him to find out through Joe. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, knowing that Joe is, I don't know if he's upset with Spence. I don't know what's going on with Joe. But I guess he's stressed and he just acts like Spence just left him hanging. So I just kind of had the feeling that if Jason went to go ask Joe how it was working with Spencer, that he was going to get a bad report. Okay, moving on. So Ricky goes to another football player's party. You know, the player calls it a fun house, and he goes there with TC. So we're going to go get back to that part. In the meantime, Chuck talks to his wife on the phone about the Keeson situation, and his wife is like, listen, you're not paid to dig into all of this and to be no judge and jury or whatever. Like, you do what you have to do. You put the players in place, and you get paid for that. You are paid to make sure that the teams win. Let's not lose sight of that. All the other stuff, leave it alone. Let them deal with that. Like, you don't even know if this is true that this guy had a gun or whatever. And Chuck is like, you know, it is true. It's not a rumor. And I don't know if I could deal with this. Like, if my conscience could handle having someone like this on the team. This is not verbatim. This is, you know, me paraphrasing. So she's like, listen, babe, we got to do what we got to do. We have another child coming because she's pregnant now. We have another child coming. We have 2 kids we're going to have to put through college. Nobody has time. It's time for us to think about us and the money that we need to make and our needs and everything for our family. And he said, you know what, babe, you're right. And then we leave it at that scene. So now Jason he talks with Joe via phone, and he says, how is it working with Spence? Joe's like, why do you want to know? Jason tells him, it's because I was offered a GM job. And so Joe is like, okay, instead of answering the question right away, he goes, how about, do you want to sell your agency or whatever? And then, what's his name? Jason's like, sounds like a good idea. We're going to think about that as well. So before they end the conversation, their phone call, Joe's last words were, Spencer is a effing nightmare. And that's that. Okay. So he's like, ugh. And then whatchamacallit's response was, I figured that or whatever. So my thing was kind of like joke, but not a joke. And the way Jason took it was kind of like, it seemed like it was with a grain of salt. But we see later on that that is not how he took it. And we will talk about that a little later. All right. So now TC, meanwhile at the party, the fun house, TC is trying to be the moral compass for Ricky, and because Ricky is over here flirting with girls and stuff like that, and TC is like, what are you doing, you know? And Ricky's like, why are you being a cop? a cock blocker. You know what I mean? Like, you used to be the world's best wingman. Now look at you, or whatever. And TC is like, well, I love your family, you know? Like, you need to do better. So Ricky's like, you're judging me and all that. And he pushes TC in the pool, which is a little mean. I'm like, you know, poor TC. He suffers a lot of abuse from Ricky. But anyway, we're going to get back to that. That was one scene, because that was a pretty short scene. All right. And then, meanwhile, we have a meeting with Reggie and Vernon. They're having a meeting with some pro gamers, and the pro gamers are kind of like laughing at Vernon, like, you know, what do you know about being professional and joining our team, this and that and the third. Like, oh, let's just go and play some football. I mean, we could just join the football team, a professional football team. Like, you know, so they're basically just saying you can't just hop, just the same as we can't just hop into your fields of expertise. You can't just come over here and hop into our fields of expertise. So they weren't taking Vernon seriously. And Vernon's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean no disrespect. And Vernon's like, you don't need to, oh my gosh, Vernon, I'm sorry guys, I'm mixing up the names. Vernon says, I'm sorry guys, to the pro gamers. I didn't mean any disrespect. Reggie says, you don't need to apologize to nobody. And they're like, who are you? And he's like, well, I'm such and such. He dropped his title or whatever for whatever he does for Sports X. And then they started to listen. And they started to hear his scores and everything like that, Vernon's scores, and then they started taking him seriously. So then they go, well, if we allow you to join our team, what's your availability going to be while you're playing pro ball? And so Reggie says, let me worry about Vernon's calendar. But then Vernon turns around and say, well, if I join your team, you guys let me join your team, I will quit pro football. And Reggie looked at him like, what? And I was thinking like, what? Like, what is wrong with this guy? So, but we're going to touch on that a little later as well. So meanwhile, TC runs and tells on Ricky, and he gets Dennis, Ricky's father, to come to the party. Dennis breaks down the door that Ricky is in with another female. He's flirting around with her, taking pics and blah, blah, blah. And they're both asking, TC and Dennis are both asking, like, what is wrong with you, man? Like, what are you doing? And then the girl is throwing in her 2 cents, like, oh, you know, he's depressed, this and that. And they're like, yeah, we know. And we're trying to make sure that this guy doesn't do anything stupid, you know? So anyway, long story short, they take him out of there and, you know, bring him home because he's just like, I guess he's just saying, I'm just trying to have a little fun. But they're like, no, you're doing it the wrong way. You're going about it the wrong way. You don't want to ruin your family in the meantime, like while you're having fun. So on the drive home, because I think I'm skipping. All right. No, actually, I don't want to skip. I'm gonna keep going scene by scene. So Brett calls Spence to let him know that him and his brother met with the bankers, and the bankers are all in to fund Spence buying this team. And the only problem is that Brett told them that they already have a GM lined up, which is totally false. But Brett told the bankers this in faith, believing that Spencer already had the GM lined up. So unfortunately, Brett had good news for Spence, but Spence didn't have good news for Brett. And Brett is like, well, you got to do what you got to do. Like, there's $3 billion on the table now that we will have to pay back. So you better make this happen and get that GM. So next, Jason goes to see Joe. And this kind of confused me because when he got there, Joe was like, oh, you know, all of this could be yours. He went to Sports X and he says to Jason, all of this could be yours. So I was just kind of confused about that because I thought that the offer was for Joe to buy Jason's agency. So I wasn't exactly sure why he would say to Joe, this could all be yours. So whatever. We're just going to move past it because there's going to be a conclusion to that coming down the line. So, Ricky, later on, as he's going home, they're listening to, I forgot what this guy's name is, but he's like a sports commentator over the radio. And then Ricky is saying, oh, you know, they think everything is so simple and sometimes there's no answer for this and answer for that. They think that there has to be an answer for everything when sometimes there isn't. And I could do a better job at commentating than they can. So now I'm starting to see that this might be the new thing that Ricky might get involved with as a new career. So that was kind of good to see. That was a little switch and a little change. All right. So he told TC to set up a meeting. So then we move on. Now Vernon gets in another scene, and I know I'm moving fast. Vernon gets a great deal for $80 million for his new contract. He gets the call. Reggie gets the call from Jason, and Jason tells him that Vernon has a new $80 million contract, which is great. So Vernon is so happy, and Jason is like, I mean, not Vernon. Oh my gosh. Reggie is so happy to tell Vernon about this. And Vernon is like, who cares? I don't care about that. And he's like, Reggie's like, what? What are you talking about? This is $80 million. And Vernon is like, you know, I want to play pro gaming. He wants to be a pro gamer. He's like, I don't care about money. I have money already. And at what point do you say how much money is enough? And he basically let Reggie know that he's thinking about retiring from football. You know, so only thing that I have to say to that, because at first I thought that the whole gaming thing was stupid, especially since he was already a pro ball player. However, I do understand that it's important to do something that you love. You know, if you want to make money, you should definitely do it at something that you love. So I'm very passionate about that. So I do relate to him, and I understand that sometimes money doesn't buy you peace and it doesn't bring you happiness. You know, sometimes I mean, clearly, football doesn't make him happy. It's brought him a lot of money, but he's tired of it now. And then now pro gaming is something that he really, really loves. So that's a good thing. Anyway, moving on. So Chuck confronts Keeson in another scene. And he's saying to Keeson, like, are you telling me everything? Like, is there anything else you want to tell me? And Keeson was like, no, I told you everything I know, you know. And he said that. And so Chuck is like, okay. Because, you know, Chuck already knows there's a gun situation. So Keeson's like, you see that guy over there, my boy? He is the one that's going to he's going to turn himself in. He's the shooter. And so, whatchamacallit, Chuck is like, so he's your fall guy. And he was like, does it matter? Keeson saying, does it matter? And then Chuck is like, yeah, it does matter. And long story short, he's saying, like, I just need you to be truthful. And Keeson is like, yeah, I am being truthful. And so, you know what? Chuck says, and you know what, here's the truth. It was a pleasure working with you. I'm letting you go. So he leaves the scene. And I totally agree. So Chuck, you know, he was agreeing with his wife, what she was saying before. But I believe that his conscience, like he was saying, he went back to, when he went to go speak to Keeson, I don't think he was going there to fire him. I think he was going there to just talk to him and see if Keeson was going to own up to anything. But Keeson does not. Instead, Keeson thinks that he could do what he wants to do, and then he have his boys, you know, who are ride or die, willing to go to jail and all of that for him. And so, and basically leaving no lesson learned. So I think that Chuck, in the meantime, in the long run, he's covering himself by letting go of Keeson, because he sees that Keeson is a problem. He's a problem child. You know, he's someone that just won't let go of that other life, and who's not taking his professional career seriously. On top of that, I believe Chuck was turned off by the fact that Keeson was already having a drink of brandy, like in midday, or I don't know if it was the morning or midday, but regardless, he's like, it's a little too early for brandy, especially with this career that you have as an athlete. So I totally get it. I'm all for Chuck doing that. That was actually good. So anyway, we're about to close. The final scene, we see Jason calling, I don't know if Jason calls Spence and lets him know that he is declining the offer for GM and that he got a better offer of $50 million from none other than Joe Crutel. Oh my goodness. And so Spence is like, oh, so you want to be an agent for the rest of your life. You want to die an agent. And he's like, I'm going to, you know, you won't regret it if you be my GM. And then he's like, Jason is like, I'm sorry, Spence, but I'm going with this deal. It's a great deal. You know, there's a 5-year payout or something like that. So, you know, of course, Spence is not happy, and he's left to do the only thing that he can do, which is to become the general manager of his own team. So we're going to see how that goes next week. Looks like it's Things are heating up, which I like. So I'm going to make sure that I'm on top of doing my reviews for this season. I do apologize for the lateness. But that is that, and that's a wrap. And I'll see you guys next week for episode 4. All right? Let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Okay, no, I didn't forget anything. But I will see you guys next week for that. Thank you for joining me. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that notification bell so that you know when I upload new videos. All right, until next time, take care, and thanks again for joining me.